Hey everybody, steveo here for Movies and TVs on the ball, and welcome back to another video. We are on our 6th podcast for the week, which I am going to be discussing because it is the 26th anniversary of this film, and they are releasing a 4th installment this Christmas called Focker-in-Law. I am looking at the 2000 film Meet the Parents, starring Ben Stiller, Robert De Niro, Owen Wilson, and Terry Polo as Jack Burns' Diane or Bethany Diener as Diana Burns, and also we have the late great James Robson and Robhorn, excuse me, and um and that's about it. This was directed by Jay Roach, and Jay Roach you probably know from directing both the Austin Powers film series from 1997 to 2003. He's directed the Meet the Parents, first two Meet the Parents films, and he has been the producer of Borat. The reason why I'm covering this is they're having so they're doing a 4th film called Focker-in-Law, which I kind of think is really interesting because now we're seeing Ben Stiller's character, Gaylord Focker, as the father of the groom, and I think that's kind of a nice kind of twist that we're finally getting sort of a new take on it. This film came out in 2000. I was about 12 years old. It spawned 2 sequels, well, 4 sequels. It spawned a sequel in 2004 called Meet the Fockers with Barbara Streisand and Dustin Hoffman. It also has and then did a 3rd film called Little Fockers, which came out I think in 2011 or 2012. So each film, I think it's a pretty decent franchise. You know, you had Owen Wilson as Pam's ex-boyfriend and kind of friend, and this is Ben Stiller's and I think Owen Wilson's first outing as a comic duo. They would reprise, or they would join up or reunite in the next year in 2001 with Zoolander, playing Hansel and Derek Zoolander, and also in the Night at the Museum franchise as well. And I wanted to cover this film mainly because I just found I just put random movies on since I own a lot of movies. But since I found out about the 4th installment, I figure, and since it's been 26 years since the original, I wanted to take a look at this movie and kind of give you my critique of it, if you will. So this film, I kind of liked how this film really starts off, is that that the film sort of focuses on both Greg and Pam's relationship. At first, Greg is a nurse, and he asks he asked Pam uh, to get married, and while he's doing it, he does. I really like the fact he does this very lovingly um, proposal where she's a kindergarten teacher, and he shows up uh, to quote unquote take her to lunch, and as he's um, about to propose, he does this really sweet thing where she was supposed to um, he's supposed to kind of propose, will you, and he was supposed to propose and say, will you turn around, and the kids are all saying, will you have a sign that says, will you marry me, Pam? And unfortunately, Pam gets a phone call from her sister Debbie, who says that her fiance or her boyfriend just proposed to her about being a fiance, and basically, she says, Pam says, did Dad really approve of it? And she said yes. So this film, um, so so Ben Stiller or Greg and Pam both go to both go to visit her parents in Long Island, and I really liked um, how really we get straight into it where they end up going on a plane ride, and this is 2000, so this was before 9/11. So there, she's having an issue. Gaylord is having, or Ben Stiller's having an issue with with his luggage going through the security, and he says if it ain't going through the back, if it ain't getting through the X-ray, it's not gonna go. It ain't getting on the plane, and it ends up he ends up losing his luggage on the plane when they get to Pam's parents' um, house in Long Island, and so because of that, I really liked first off how Pam and Greg are a really sweet couple, and I like how Greg is got this present for his dad that he's really gonna like it, and they go once they pull up, they really meet, and I really like Pam and Jack, uh, Robert De Niro's characters, kind of really playful father-daughter friendship where they do this kind of pancake handshake, which is kind of cute, and and Vince and uh, Greg basically says, kind of is a little bit nervous and kind of timid, and the first thing that after being introduced to um, Diana and Jack, he asked Ben Stiller, or he asked Ben Stiller, Greg, to ask him, "Oh, nice car," and he's like, "What kind of car did you get?" And they said, "Oh," he's like, "Oh, see, it was green, and that was the only one they had." And I like how Jack starts to sort of right then and there sort of look his his future son-in-law up and down, and throughout the movie he's just tries to Greg tries to really bond with Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro um, really doesn't see him eye to eye. There's so he's kind of and I think the big joke of the film is Greg is a male nurse, and he gets and I think and he's very Greg's very much like pretty proud that he's a nurse, but um, I think the rest of the family makes fun of the fact that Greg doesn't have any didn't go for his doctor, and he kind of seems like I was going to, and I don't know if it was sort of during the times in 2020 in 2000 when maybe this joke would have landed. Now I know a lot of friends from the from the that from childhood that have gone into nursing, and there are male nurses. So I think the joke is probably a little dated for this type of story, but I think the comedy's there. I like the and basically Ben Stiller spends most of his time trying to woo his hopefully future in-laws relationship relationship so he can marry Pam, and we see he's kind of trying to kind of fit in with Jack, and um we see how Jack does we see what Jack has been up to since he quote unquote retired from the flower from being a botanist, and we see that he's been working on that nanny cameras that have been sort of secretly installed, like kind of small little cameras like the ones in Spy Kids that have been installed the around the house, and he's you kind of can see a little bit of the of him slowly becoming very cautious, and what his what he might be into. And meanwhile and I like how Robert De Niro or Jack tells Ben Stiller that he says as he words it, keep the snake in the cage, and I like how Pam is sort of like, well, we're not in junior high school, but I like how Greg really respects Jack's Jack's rules, and I think that's what makes him done well. And when they first I really like how Pam is trying to really get Greg or Gaylord to really connect with her father, and we see kind of like, I like how there's sort of a mystery with these phone calls from that Jack answers, that there's sort of something secret about it, and when you kind of find out later in the movie what it is. That's kind of like that is the mystery. That's sort of the, I guess, red herring of the movie. And I think makes the movie. We have, so since Greg lost his luggage, he's been kind of wearing his her Pam's brother's clothes and Jack's spare pajamas, and he's sleeping kind of in the den. And he sort of looks around and finds the polygraph, and Robert De Niro says, "Oh, you like what you see?" And he's like, "That's an old classic polygraph machine. Would you like to try it out?" And he's like, "Sure." And they strap him in, and Robert De Niro or Jack Burns gives him a lot of questions about first like dinner, like what did they have for dinner tonight, and how did you like the food, to does he watch pornographic videos, and he's asking a lot of questions, and and we see, and he starts looking at the needles and seeing which needle is moving, and he kind of looks, and I like that scene. I think that's what makes the movie really work, is just that dynamic between Jack and Greg. And then then the story, then we kind of find out Jack's secret through Pam, who informs Greg that that Jack wasn't a florist, but instead worked for the CIA as an agent that interrogated people. And I think what I like about the fact that that's a pretty interesting, nice twist, but when Ben Stiller's character is looking around the Jack's den, or Jack's basement, he sees a lot of pictures of him, like with Colin Powell, President Clinton. This was 2000, so Bush kind of wasn't in the White House yet. And he shows pictures of him in being in the Middle East. And I like how Greg is just chewing gum, and he's trying to go through what he just experienced, and in the shockingness that Pam finds out that her boyfriend was just interrogated, she kind of takes it. I like how she says, "Well, my father doesn't really need to have a lie, doesn't need to really use a lie detector test. He's kind of a human lie detector." And she basically tells him that he was working for the CIA, like I said, and then Robert De Niro tells Jack tells Greg that his don't know that you've entered the circle of trust, which I think is a real different motif throughout the film franchise. And so he wakes up, and the first thing is he wakes up right in front of Robert De Niro, who says, you need to that why shouldn't you wake him up, because he was a guest in the house, and that you were in the circle of trust, so if you get out, so you need to be honest and be and not let anybody else know that I'm ex CIA basically. Um, I really like that that thing that plot. Then they're getting ready. I like how we meet Kevin, who is Owen Wilson's character, and Kevin is says he got into the stock market right around the telecommunication error, and he says, I'm been working. It's kind of been a pretty big thing, and he's been working on sort of um, a garden motif for Pam's sister and her fiance that she'll be married at the time, and she's working on that. They get their swimsuits, and I like the fact that Greg doesn't have a swimsuit, and he basically gets a um, spare swimsuit, which is a speedo, and they end up having a speedo, and everybody sort of makes fun of him. And I like that. I do feel, you do feel bad for Greg that he has been so having such a hard time for being with his future in-laws. I think that's just the joke, but so they play volleyball. There's a lot of tension, a little bit of tension between um, between Greg and Pam, because Pam and Kevin Owen Wilson used to date, and that they are basically kind of have a friendship, and there's um, a lot of references to Top Gun and Goose and Maverick, and I really like that friendship relationship between Owen Wilson and Pam. I think that works. That works really well. So they end up playing volleyball. Greg gets a little bit too into it and spikes the ball, hitting Pam's sister in the face, making her nose bleed and giving her a black eye. And Greg is a little bit too, not making the best impressions, but I think that's how it works. Um, I really like the Grace scene because they have dinner, and I think it's hilarious. He says, they start talking about um how you've had fresh vegetables in working on a farm, and I like how Pam kind of says, well, Dad, he never lived on a farm. He he lived in the city. And he said, Greg, I thought you said you worked in a farm, but you said you milked animals. And and Ben Stiller's looking around to find something to kind of cover his ass. And he says, I milked a cat once. And he talks, and he does. And I do like how Greg or Ben Stiller really gives his all in this, where he's like, yeah, I milked a cat once, and he says there was this little Geppetto, I called him, that was a little runt, and I just milked him. And then there's the famous line that was played in all the trailers where Robert De Niro says, well, I have nipples, Greg, can you milk me? And he and I thought that was a pretty funny. And then also at the dinner, we find out that there's the urn of Jack's mom is on the kind of next to the banner, and he thinks that it's a camera, and he starts saying, "Ooh," Greg does, and and Jack says, "She's, it's my mom," or um, J- um, the mom says, "That's Jack's urn. That's Jack's mother's urn," and Jack says, "I like to watch him. I like to think that she's watching over us as we eat," which is pretty sweet. But then Ben Stiller ruins it by getting corking, uncorking a bottle of champagne. This knocks off hits the urn. The urn falls. The cat gets into it. The cat urinates on it, and the everyone's like, Pat Jinxie, and this is not going well for f- going well for Ben Stiller. I so the film pretty much we kind of get so the cat ends up a couple things happen. The cat flushes the toilet that he was told not to use, but Ben Stiller's blamed for it, so the septic tanks overflows. So I think that's the funny joke, and then Kevin shows up and ends up making it a little worse, not by his own fault. And then they end up trying to get the table, kind of get the everything in order for the wedding that's going to be outside at their house. So then you kind of get the then I think you get sort of the liar revealed, basically, where uh, uh, Gaylord sort of finds out that there's something going on with Jack. That Jack's, he still assumes that Jack's still in the CIA, and he's like, I heard him over the phone. He talks Thai, and he said, well, actually, and then, or he's like, he talks Thai, and he was also at the drugstore in the parking lot with a strange man. So he kind of thinks that he's still part of the CIA, and then I like how Robert De Niro plays it, where he goes, "Yeah, it's true, it's true, it's true," and the reason why I'm doing it is because the guy that I met in the parking lot was the travel agent, and I was talking to the person or met the travel agent with their tickets. I was talking to a group that they were gonna go to their honeymoon in Thailand, and Ben Stiller kind of ruins it. So we kind of get the, I wouldn't say liar reveal, but the character sort of gets kicked out of the house, and or Ben Stiller gets kicked out of the house, and so I really love the fact that he goes to the airport, and while he's at the airport, he's the only one in line. There's no really line, but he's the only one in line, and the stewardess says, "Well, we're boarding rows, 1 through 10, or 1 through 18 or something," and Ben Stiller says, "Well, I'm in row 8 or row 10. Can you just speed it up?" And she says, "No, that's not how it works." And so, because he left his luggage the last time he was on a plane, in this one this time he gets on the plane, and he can't get his luggage on the um, up at the cargo area, and she's like, "I'm going to move your luggage to the bottom," and he's like, "No, I'm not going to let you do that because I lost it last time, and it's not like I have a bomb in there." And everyone's like, "Bomb, oh my gosh." And this is before 9/11, so it's trying to be humorous. And he says, "It's not like I've got a bomb, and he basically gets thrown out the airplane and is interrogated by TSA, and TSA says, "You know, you're not allowed to say bomb on an airplane." He says, "Why not?" And they, and then after Pam reveals to Jack that he passed his MCAPs, Jack ends up going to get his son-in-law out of um out of sort of TSA custody. And then I really like the fact that Jack and Ben Stiller's character, they have a heart to heart um about sort of, I'm sorry about this weekend, and then will you, and Jack sort of says, are you going to, be supportive of my daughter, love her, cherish her, be, really understand. And I think in a way, but then Ben Stiller says, will you kind of let us live our lives and be supportive as well, and not knowing that they are that they're going to be a couple, and they're going to, that he doesn't need to be too in their lives. And then um I like how Robert De Niro says, Greg Gaylord Fokker, will you be my son-in-law? And then we kind of sort of end where his other daughter is getting married and the wedding. And I like the fact that Ben Stiller is sitting next to his future mother and father-in-law. And then at the end, there's sort of a wink to the sequel, which, it came out 4 years later in Meet the Fockers, but there's a line where he says, "I guess now we got to meet the parents, meet his parents," and that's kind of how it ends. I like this movie. I think the movie really works. I really believe Pam or Ben Stiller relationship with Terry Polo is, genuinely works. I like how, I think Robert De Niro, this is one of his, most funniest movies where he's funny, but he doesn't try to be. I mean, he's genuinely looking for the comedy. We had I like the fact that she has a brother that's doesn't really get that much attention. There's a scene where they're trying on tux for his other daughter's wedding, and um, her brother-in-law, or Pam's brother, puts a marijuana bong in Greg's suit, and there's that famous line where he says, "If you're trying to corrupt my daughter, then I'm going to bring you down, son. I'm going to bring you down to Chinatown." And I really think this movie works really well. I know why they had sequels. I'm kind of intrigued by the fact that they're doing a fourth film called Fokker-in-Law, where I really think it's kind of cool. It's just interesting now seeing Ben Stiller's character be in the Robert De Niro story. And I liked how Ariana Grande playing this is going to be kind of going to be the Ben Stiller character. They had two sequels called Meet the Fockers, which came out in 2004 with a really good cast for Ben Stiller's parents. They had Dustin Hoffman, and they had Barbara Streisand, and Barbara Streisand played a therapist. And then they did a third one called Little Fockers, which dealt with what is it like to have kids now. I don't think um, I don't think it did as hot as It came out 10 years after the original film, and it wasn't directed by Paul Wise. It was directed by Paul Wise, and this film was, I think, pretty good. I'll probably look at it when we get closer to uh, Fokker and Law, the fourth one, and kind of go through see how this evolves through the film series. So, Meet the Parents. Got a 85% on Rotten Tomato and got a 7.7 out of 10 on IMDb. The audience score on Rotten Tomato is 79% with 85% critic score. For me, I really like this film. I like the dynamic between Robert De Niro and Ben Stiller, and I think the cast really works really well. I like Owen Wilson sort of as the ex-boyfriend, and he's not. I like the fact that he's not sleazy and trying to be. He's not sleazy, but he's trying to be. He's more of the kind of. He's got more of a his. He's more. He seems to be more successful. He's like the other successful boyfriend in movies. So I would say I like Meet the Parents. I think it works really well. So what I'll probably give it is I'll give it a nice B plus film in my letter grade, and probably maybe 89 on my grades 1 through 10, maybe 89 to 90. I think it works really well. I think that this is a pretty decent, fun family, a little raunchy comedy. But yeah, that's my look at Meet the Parents on its 26th anniversary. Let me know what your thoughts are on Meet the Parents. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And do you think that this movie should have deserved sequels, or did you feel like this film wasn't as good as it could have been? So let me know in the comments below, and see you at the movies. Bye.